You're listening to Forging Fluidity with Savannah Wishart and Griffin Coombs, where we humbly navigate the idea of primal purpose, exploring conversations around physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being on the quest for a truly conscious and meaningful human experience. In this episode, we get into some of the ideas behind the title of this podcast, Forging Fluidity, how discipline and structure can actually create freedom and flow, how honestly reevaluating goals and expectations can be an act of extreme courage, and how we strive to integrate the masculine and the feminine energies in our own lives. We talk about these things publicly because we believe they matter for all humans, so please join the conversation by subscribing, sharing the podcast with someone else, and reaching out to us directly to let us know your thoughts. And now, enjoy this week's conversation.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode at Forging Fluidity on Navigating Primal Purpose with my co-host Griffin Coombs.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are coming at you with our official podcast name. So for our first episode, we didn't yet know what we were going to call this. So we now have Forging Fluidity as our anchor point. And we felt that we wanted to combine something that felt masculine balanced with something that felt feminine. So to forge feels to carve a path, which feels very masculine for us. And then we have the fluidity balancing out the feminine, so surrender and flow.
Yeah, and we wanted this to be a bit of a shorter episode to balance out kind of our pilot. Longer episode. It was about an hour long, but we wanted to just set the stage for how we define masculinity and femininity before any gender identity politics get in the way, because it's not about gender, it's not about social anything. It's about energy and polarity. And if those who aren't comfortable calling it masculine and feminine can call it whatever you want, yin and yang, or whatever terminology suits you. But I've just heard masculine and feminine be used for polarity in so many different contexts. And when it comes to just navigating the energy of life and being human, I really do think it's meaningful. And I really do think that it's something that should be talked about and at least considered when we're thinking about balancing the way that we approach things, our attitudes, and just how we receive the challenges of life and how we create our own life. So we can talk a little bit, I think, about just what masculinity and femininity means to us, or how we just picture those poles, those two kind of magnetic opposites, and then go into just a little bit about how that manifests in our lives. Savannah, do you have any thoughts on just kind of what masculinity and or femininity mean to you in terms of energy?
With my experience of navigating the polarities of masculine and feminine, I see it as both polarities because we're not operating on neutral ground as humans, whether we're male, female, or non-binary. We have different elements that we have to orchestrate together. And so while they are polarities, they also complement one another. Like if we lean too far into one and neglect the other, then we'll be missing something, and vice versa. So for me, it has been about less bouncing between them, though that does tend to happen, especially if I'm not in a more fluid state of alignment in being. But I think of it as weaving them together. So weaving these power dynamics together. And so I love power dynamics in the sense of control and surrender. often within mainstream media, I think that we think of power dynamics as being a sexual interplay between two people. So you have someone who is in control, and you have someone who is not in control, and they are submitting or they are surrendering. But if you look at it deeper and you look at the masculine and feminine elements, then I see these as two ways of being that can be experienced within ourselves. And so we don't need to bring another person into the equation to play those out, but we can have it be an internal journey in how we experience life. So for me, masculine is my comfort zone. I love CrossFit. I love hardcore training, the high intensity. We spoke a little bit about this in our first episode. Really pushing things and having control, having a schedule, hoping at least that I have some kind of idea of what the outcome to an action will look like. On the other hand, to me, feminine means to surrender into what life gives us and to allow things to happen, to allow life to unfold fairly organically, and to let go of any attachment to an outcome. So with movement, it also would be to do yoga or to do animal flow or to do something that focuses on sensual embodiment. And so you're not training the mind so much on a formula of you must do A, B, and C to reach Z, but instead you're just sinking into your body and you're finding that, again, we spoke about it in the first episode, the ability to step out of your mind and into the body and to kind of surrender into that moment. And so it is very much, I think, about detachment from the outcome.
That's a good way to put it. I hadn't thought about kind of outcome versus the process, but it makes total sense, because if you're focused on the outcome, for me, I think about it in terms of in your mind and in your versus in your body a lot, and having to have both, because both are obviously useful and important for humans. When you think about outcome lives in the mind. And I'm just thinking about what you just said and how outcome is almost by definition in the future. And so the future only really exists as a thought in the mind. And so in order to be outcome focused, you kind of have to be in your head. And to be process oriented or focused on the journey itself, you have to be there in the moment, which I think embodiment of the body, sensual embodiment, as you put it, is a huge piece of that. So it was just interesting. I had never thought of masculine. I've never linked masculine to outcome and feminine to process. But I like that. And it aligns with kind of the way that I do picture it. I mean, there are so many qualities that you can give to masculine and feminine. And again, call it yin and yang, call it whatever you want. But there's this one side of, if I were to just throw out some words that coincide with masculinity, it might be decisiveness, control, order, structure. Decisiveness, I don't know if I said that already. Whereas femininity would be freedom, intuition. The other thing for masculinity would be like, I've heard it described as the container, and the feminine as the expressivity, the expressiveness that is contained by the masculine. And this brings up something else. Mike Fitch is the founder of Animal Flow, which I really like teaching Animal Flow. I really like practicing Animal Flow. And he always talks about freedom through structure. I think that speaks to this concept of the masculine being a container for the feminine. And if you were to think of it as like a painting, that's a beautiful painting, and the masculine kind of frames that painting. Whereas if you don't have any structure at all, then it almost sometimes feels unsafe because you don't know where your boundaries are. You don't know. So if we were to put it back in the context of movement, like if someone were just to say, we're just going to do a workout and do whatever you want, there are a lot of options there. And it almost feels paralyzing to even try to, you have no direction. But if you were to say, okay, here are the parameters within which you can be totally creative. For a lot of people, including myself, that gives me a little bit more freedom because I know what I can and can't do. I know what my tools are. I know what my resources are, and I know the boundaries. And then within that structure, I feel free to do whatever I want, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the concept as well of discipline equals freedom. Like we need to have an anchor point to grow from and expand from and to build upon. And I think Mark Manson talks about this as well of like if you are lacking structure and you don't have like that foundation to move pieces between and to grow from, then life becomes very superficial, or it has the potential to become very superficial and like lacking meaning, I think. Because people say, like, oh, I would love to have a vacation all the time. And we've talked about this before. Like you might
Oh,
be
yeah.
craving a vacation because you're overworked and you're exhausted, but on day 5 of laying on the beach, then you're kind of like, okay, well, now I'm craving a high intensity workout or whatever, because you've bounced back between these polarities. And so
Totally.
then the question might then become like, instead of bouncing back between polarities, is there a way that you can make it more sustainable so that you have the balance and you don't need to leave one extreme for the other?
I wonder if that just has to do with more instantaneously recognizing what you need. Maybe it's a matter of self attunement, because if you go on the vacation, you're probably craving that high intensity workout or something with some structure in it, something that's not just lying on the beach. You're probably craving that really before day 5, but it's easy to let ourselves just keep doing it until day 5. And then by then, it's like we feel like the pendulum has swung completely in the other direction. And then we need to kind of swing it back. Whereas if after day 1 of that vacation, you realize already you're much more relaxed than you were when you just finished work and you were like, oh my God, I need a vacation. And you really tuned in and said, you know what, I could go for a jog right now, or I could do, it doesn't even have to be physical, whatever it is that has structure or meaning, or just is a little bit more masculine, as it were, than just lying on the beach. And then kind of integrating that on day 2 and 3 and 4 with the lying on the beach, instead of just saying, well, I'm on vacation now, so all I'm going to do is just kind of mess around and be on vacation, and then I'll worry about structure when I get back. It's more of a, so I think we can integrate more if we're honest with ourselves sooner, I guess is what my point is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's easy. I was saying earlier how I'm really attracted to extremes. So for so long, that was exactly my approach, was just, work hard, play hard, all in, working high intensity workouts all the time. And then when I had my designated vacation time or break time or whatever it is, swing the pendulum in the opposite direction and just like binge eat whatever I want, do absolutely nothing. And it was almost like I was making a statement to the other side of myself, saying like, no, I'm good. Like, just see how ridiculous I could get with like refusing to do anything of structure or order or whatever else, and just, telling myself, no, I'm not going to exercise because I'm on vacation and I'm making a point to do nothing. And that becomes silly because even though you might describe lying on the beach as a feminine expression of life, so as softness and ease and expression and freedom and lack of structure, as soon as you get in your head and tell yourself, I'm not going to go for a run, or I'm not going to eat a healthy meal because I told myself that I'm going to do whatever I want and do all the stuff that's quote unquote bad for me, you're going right back to the masculine in a different way. You're living in your head and you're telling yourself these things, and you're not allowing yourself to feel into what you really need and pivot. And it's just so easy to do that for a lot of people, including myself. It's just so easy not to worry about balance. And so I have to be weary of catching myself telling myself that I'm always going to do this or I'm never going to do that. Every single morning I'm going to wake up at this time, and every single morning I'm going to start with breath work, and every single evening I'm going to journal at this time. I'm very susceptible to that, and I'm very susceptible to other coaches or other systems that would tell you to do the same thing. Like, taking it back to the physical stuff, it's just like never lift weights, or never flex your spine, or never drop your ankle bone or flatten your arch. It's like anybody who's telling you always or never, it's really tantalizing to me, and everybody should be very weary of those claims, I think, for that reason.
Yeah, what you said about the beach also leaning into the masculine, I think that also is important in highlighting that both with the masculine and feminine, we have a healthy expression and an unhealthy expression of those energies. And so the energies are not going to be coming from a neutral place or a positive place all the time, but we do also have to balance like the shadow side of those energies as well. So the all or nothing attitude can be an example of that masculine energy that doesn't always benefit us. And as you were explaining this all or nothing approach on vacations, I see it like living on a beachside town right now. Everyone's in vacation mode, it's high season, and you do have that all or nothing attitude where people, especially from Northern Europe, where it's a very structured society, like they just want to unleash and let go, and like in their definition of the word, like live and let loose. And so it involves a lot of partying, it involves a lot of drinking, it involves a lot of eating and just indulgence. And to me, so I hear what you're saying, and I see that as a very common thing with humans and generally a very common approach to life. And for me, while I also lean very much into the all or nothing, it's more in terms of health and diet, and like the way that I eat, I'll eat very clean and avoid certain things completely because I don't want to be tempted by it. And I've not really gone into the all or nothing of like the partying or the indulgent lifestyle because that isn't something that I've ever been interested in. But I wonder, for people who do that, like what is to be gained by kind of fighting these opposites of yourself, like this masculine, as you said, determination to be like, I'm gonna eat bad because I'm on vacation. And I look at that kind of attitude and I wonder, like, why? What is the benefit of this? And what if you could actually create some kind of balance or harmony in your daily life that feels sustainable, rather than going between these opposites where you have to almost escape your life And then when you go to escape your life, you are out of balance as well.
I'm glad you used the word escape, because that was the word that popped into my mind also. So my take on that would be that it's necessary for us to get into our body and to be honest and to allow ourselves to feel in the present moment in order for us to truly integrate the masculine and the feminine, the structure and the freedom, every other vocabulary word we've used. And if you're telling yourself, I'm doing this no matter what, it's an excuse not to feel. That's a very general term, but I think in a lot of people, including myself, and one of the reasons I'm so attracted to extreme masculine energy sometimes is because living in my head and planning and feeling like I have structure that exists outside of myself is a safe place for me. And feeling like truly feeling in my body is not always a safe place for me. And we all have trauma, and that's where trauma lives. And as soon as you let trauma surface in the body, it can feel very, very unsafe. And different people run away from that lack of safety in a lot of different ways. And a foundational way to do that is to get into your head, because you can't be in your body if you're in your head. And a more direct physical way of doing it would be kind of substance abuse itself, right? Just numbing it with, and it doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol. It can be food. It could even be socializing. It could be to not have to sit with yourself and your deep sort of where your trauma lives. You just go spend time with other people and take the focus outside of yourself. Anything that takes the focus on a sensation or a person or a thought outside of what you're feeling in your body is an escape. And this isn't a judgment. I just said I do it all the time too. It's something that I'm really working toward. And so that becomes your safe place of saying, no, this is what I'm doing. And if I change what I'm doing, that means I have to have a reason to change. And the only reason that I would change is because I feel like my body, myself, the essence of who I am needs something else. And I'm not ready to dive into myself and to feel that. So I'm just going to stick with the plan, even if it doesn't really serve me.
Because feeling is terrifying.
Exactly.
Sometimes it can be.
It sure can.
Like, structure is very safe. And what came to my mind as you're explaining that is that if you have a structure, you have like a standard operating procedure. You have this layout, this formula of what your life looks like, what you want. And it's easy to fall into that and to stay within it. And it's easy to also get attached to this idea that this could be your forever plan. But what if it's not? Mm-hmm. Like, what if things change? What if you outgrow those goals? What if you outgrow the people in your life, the relationships in your life, the job? Like, what if suddenly you wake up and you're just like, oh, this doesn't fit right anymore. It's like your skin is loose or too tight and you need to shed it away. But we can so easily get attached to that. And then the structure keeps us safe, because if we just are like, this is the plan that I had 2 years ago, I'm going to follow it. You avoid asking why. And like, could life actually be better? Does this still benefit me?
Yeah. Because asking why forces you to explore those answers within, which again can be terrifying. You said outgrowing a goal. That's so important to acknowledge, because when we think of goal, we think of like, that's probably the ultimate manifestation of the masculine energy in our culture today. 2022 is setting a goal. And one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes, I love Bruce Lee as a philosopher. He was just ahead of his time in so many ways. And so I have a lot of his quotes in my back pocket, a couple of them tattooed on my body. No shame. And one of my favorites, he says, a goal is not always meant to be achieved. Sometimes it serves as something to aim at. And our acknowledgement of a goal being something that can change as well, and allowing us, it's too easy for us to use the goal and the fact that we haven't yet achieved it as an excuse to stick with the structure. Because I set this goal, so I have to keep doing this until I achieve the goal. But you set the goal, you decided that. So you can decide that it's not your goal anymore as well. No one's holding you to a goal that's your own except yourself. You just have to go that deep. Not just I said I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it. But now you have to ask why you said you were going to do it. And then that brings you to ask, do I still want to do it? And asking those questions is work, and it's scary, but it's essential to staying in alignment.
It's so essential and so important, because the way that modern society is structured, we aren't really encouraged or celebrated to change, at least in drastic ways.
Amen.
For me, goal setting has been quite a process because I used to be very focused on the idea of like your 10-year vision and all these specific goal setting methods, SMART goals. And SMART goals are so good, and some amount of goal setting, I think, is essential to an intentional, consciously lived life. But as you said, it's without an attachment to an outcome, and that we can let that goal go, and it can be a temporary compass that guides us. And for me, this is something that I've been working on, because if people don't know who are listening, I'm in Portugal, and this was never a plan for me to live in Portugal, but this came as an intuitive feeling a couple months ago, and never before had I actually thought like, oh, I want to live in Portugal. I had no interest in it. I had no interest in the language. There was never a conscious intention to be here. And I was thinking about the processes of visualization and all these different tools that we use with coaching to get us where we want to be. And I had this realization that no amount of visualization got me here. Like, it didn't benefit me. I didn't have this vision to wind up here. But as I look back over the years at different versions of the visualizations that I had or my goal setting journals, I always had fitness, coaching, food, wellness, and integration in nature at the core of it. So even if I didn't have this specific location in mind and a specific timeline of where that would be, I still had this general idea that has always been a guide. And so then there's also the ability to have flexibility in what that looks like and how it can shape itself. So then I think that goes back to that balance and the harmony of the masculine and feminine, is you create that container and then you allow life to shape pieces of it for you, and you allow information and people and invitations to come into that container, and then it becomes a co-creation, and you're not just like charging forward with your head.
Yes. So forging fluidity, now I have a beautiful image in my mind of just all of this chaos and all of this structure separate from each other. And here we are in our own lives, forging, creating this beautiful container, like this wooden frame that's just absolutely stunning. And the more that gets forged, that, you know, the word forge would be representative of the masculine. So we think about this container, and the more of that container that we can create, the more of what's within that container can move freely and expressively within it. And so it seems like in my head, like we're creating, because forging fluidity sounds like we're creating the feminine piece, the fluid piece, which maybe was a subconscious for us, because it's so much easier to embody the feminine, where it's like what we need to create in our lives is more of a leaning into the fluidity piece. But if you think about the forging fluidity as the structure itself, the forging itself, the act of creating and driving forward, allowing that fluidity to happen, it really is an integration, really is an interplay. And the challenge becomes, as we've said so many times in this episode already, is not going back and forth and not saying, okay, I've done a lot of masculine stuff, now I'm going to do a lot of feminine stuff. But the challenge is allowing them both to coexist and to ride the wave, as it were.
Yeah.
No pun intended, with the fluidity stuff.
Yeah, beautifully put. As you were describing kind of what that looks like, I had two different visions. I had like a picture frame, and then just that very geometric, angular shape, and then the blank canvas, and then just like a fire hose of like beautiful colors just spraying out and interweaving and creating a beautiful canvas of color and shape and organic art, I think. And the second visualization I had was like an arrow. So you're the tip of the spear, and it's just like shooting through water. And then it's parting the water and then creating a bunch of waves and ripple effects. And like you are that tip of the sphere that is forging to your destination. And then as the water parts and these ripples and foam is created, then you don't know where those ripples are going to go, like how far they will reach or who they might touch. And so, yeah.
That's brilliant. I'm sure we've given our listeners a lot to imagine. and maybe those of you listening have another take on what it means to forge fluidity, or how the masculine and the feminine energies show up in your life and how you honor them. So if you have any thoughts on this, reach out to us. Find us on social media or on our websites and drop us an email or a direct message. Love to hear your thoughts on this. And as always, if there's anything that you're craving in terms of a topic of discussion, mind-body connection, well-being, let us know that as well. Where can they find you again, Savannah?
You can find me at Primal Revolutions with an S on Instagram.
You can find me at Moves with Coombs on Instagram. There's underscores between each word. Moves _with _Coombs, which is my last name.
Beautiful. And just to piggyback on what Griffin said, we would love to hear any thoughts that you have, whether it's questions, suggestions, opinions, feedback on how our words might have shaped a different perspective for you. Because while it is a conversation that we are having between one another, we also would love to expand conversations with you as listeners. So we don't want this to be a one-way street of communication, but a wholesome group conversation that you are welcome to join in.
Totally agree with that. The more that we can build this community as co-conversers alongside us, I think the more powerful and meaningful this will become. So we're looking forward to hearing from you all. Until next time, this has been wonderful. We will talk to you on the next episode.
See you next week.